this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything's good over here. Kind of crazy. I hope you enjoyed the Halloween show I put out. I know it wasn't live stream, but like I said, the weather kind of made stuff difficult. Not so many things going on, but I did release it. Okay, and I did it with Henry, the wingman, and we talked about the 27 Club, Devil and Music, and all this weird stuff going on, especially with the black metallic music, and how just some people end up with how can I say, unusual endings of their lives. But anyway, if not, just look at it, the Halloween 2024 live stream. Not live stream, but show. And, people have asked me, yes, I am going to put out the Mardi Gras one, and I'm probably going to put out the one for the Christmas holidays ghost stories, which traditionally, by the way, it wasn't Halloween. It was, around Christmas time that traditional reading the ghost story thing started. So I did it last year. I'm going to do it this year. Got a good response. So I am going to do it. And here we are, speeding along towards Thanksgiving. I took down, I'm going to do, I said progressive, and I said the progressive insurance thing besides talking about the weather. Yeah, I took down all my Halloween decorations, and I refused to put up Christmas, holiday, New Year's decorations. I refuse to. I'm not going to put anything up till after Thanksgiving, and then I'll put up, I refuse. I'm digging my heels in to be commercialized into not enjoying every holiday as it comes along, because let's face it, you go into any store right now and you walk in, it's like Christmas, holidays, trees, this, that, you name it, everything is, and of course gifts, that's what it's all about. Now I'm going to enjoy my Thanksgiving thing going on. And that deal. And by the way, this time I've got a sponsor. This is a company called Handyman for Hire. They work in the South Florida area, mostly Miami-Dade and Broward County. Their number is 786-565-5055. And this is, what a lot of people are deciding that they'd rather not move, or they find, I don't think it's a good idea. So instead, they want to fix all these little things that keep falling apart in the house. Yeah, I know, as a homeowner, or honey-do list that just keeps slipping by. Time keeps slipping by, especially now in the holidays. If you're expecting families and friends and you need stuff to be done, whether it's, a new fan, putting down some floor, a new vanity in your bathroom, stuff like that. Look for Handyman for Hire, and this is handyman with the number 4, hire.info. You can go to their website, all right, and ask for Andy, and that's what they specialize in. They specialize in honey-do lists. They specialize in, people that want to maintain their house, like he says, replace and repair before it breaks. So that way it can be more costly. Like I said, nowadays people are realizing, you know what? I'm just going to stay put where I'm at, especially with the crazy, real estate market the way it is, especially in Florida.
And the best idea is, or, in some cases, also what he does is he helps if you're like an investor or you've got rental properties and you need to, like, between renters, you need to go in there and fix stuff up. He can help you with that also. So check it out. Handyman4hire.info. Again, it's handyman, the number 4hire.info. And go to the website. There's the phone number there and the email, and he's even got all videos of some of him working. And even for Christmas, by the way, or the holidays, he puts together stuff for you. You've got a kid's swing set, he'll put that together for you. You've got a shed, you've got anything. Some people, they're like, I can't build this. And you know what? I'm one of those. And I'm pretty good. But I don't know if you've all noticed that some of the instructions that come with some of these things, which are totally unbuilt, is like, I don't get it. Call him. He can help you with that. So anyway, moving on to the good part about today. This is the guest at Stories of the Supernatural. This is the first time she's been here. Her name is Solaris BlueRaven. She's a published author, producer, writer, editor, and public speaker with a professional background in covert technology, surveillance, and anomalous investigative research. She is globally known for experience as a test pilot for synthetic telepathy black projects, of which she discloses in her book series Eye of the Remote. She's a world-class psychic, clairvoyant, remote viewer, and system buster for MK Ultra related programs. She's also a certified second-degree black belt and has an extensive background in advanced sciences and mystical alchemy and healing arts. Help me welcome her. How are you doing today, Solaris?
I am well, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here
No,
with
on the
you,
contrary, it's
Marlene.
my
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.
Your bio, I'm going to ask, how did this all start for you? Was it on purpose, or did some event, something happen with you that got you
The
started
chain
on this
reaction.
path?
Yeah, it's definitely a chain reaction. Insofar as the
Okay.
supernatural, the mystical, and the background in the occult sciences,
Mm-hmm.
that was always in my DNA, in a sense of just growing up and having a natural ability to be able to do certain things. In
Okay.
2004, I went into I was extracted into a type of covert program that put me in a whole different arena with synthetic telepathy and satellite system interface and a lot of things that were very traumatic. And that's what changed my whole paradigm in my whole life. So from that point on, I started diving into advanced anomalies, synthetic telepathy, remote viewing, and then going further into how this is involved in the MK Ultra programs, so far as how they use it for
Okay.
control and remote control and that sort of thing. And I have books out on
Oh,
that with the Either Remote series. So,
right. Because how can I say it? Were you a subject of MK Ultra conditioning?
well, the whole idea behind the interconnection that I went through was definitely connected to brainwave entrainment and also conforming to a certain identification. Let's put it that way. I would call it
Hmm.
they call it reeducation. So I guess you can
Right.
put it into that area of MKUltra related programs. This one was related to live feed interface with a synthetic telepathy program with a real time handler, and with that there were command programs and certain things that were done remotely to control manipulate me. Absolutely. So I guess it's a
Oh,
form of MK Ultra, but it's not like the old days where they take you and put you in an isolation place, a
right.
facility somewhere where they program you. This was literally being extracted out of your house, being interfaced with a system, literally interconnected with technology, satellite driven technology. So you're not even, they don't show up physically until later on. So that's what happened to me in 2004, which completely gutted my life and pulled me into a whole different orbit.
How old were you?
I was 40 years old. So I had just,
And
I was
I'm not trying to put you, like tell you like how old were you as like I'm gonna show up your age, but because you usually hear about people has basically being taken as children.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I thought was weird. It's just when my life was what I consider to be perfect. I had a great husband.
Okay.
I had a great life. I was writing, I was just starting to write books. I had Transmutation through Ascension out. I was teaching martial arts. I was doing healing work and doing land surveying with my husband at the time. I had a great life. And
Okay.
that just went boom. I mean, literally, the type of system that they interconnected me with took me right out of that proximity of that radius of that residence and just pulled me to a whole different orbit. And there's a long story behind this. I have a documentary called Eye the Remote, a disclosure in covert technology, which talks about the people who perpetrated the assault. It talks about how the high profile people that were involved in some other divisions in cloaked black sciences and technologies departments. So it's been a whole different avenue for me. I mean, it was completely traumatic. I went through it, got through it, and started disclosing and decoding a lot of technology and information. And when I realized how the
Okay.
synthetic telepathy works, it was quite amazing to me to see that these particular divisions have access and are able to utilize it in different departments. So,
Were they monitoring you before they took you? Do you
not
think?
that I'm aware of. The thing is, when you talk about monitoring, after I'd sent a particular book to a high profile person, that's when I started getting what I consider to have surveillance around my residence.
Okay,
People that I
right.
didn't
That's
know
what
in
I'm
my
talking
proximity.
about.
Yes, I did have that. I had all kinds of weird, just strange, things that are out of place in a sense of that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
showing up. And the computer systems were being compromised. I call them hacked. My phone was being tagged. And then
Okay.
I was interconnected, live feed real time.
Okay. That's what I'm talking about. It was like,
Hmm.
did you, because it sounds here I'm living my ordinary life and I'm
Right.
happy and I'm doing my thing. And it's like I wonder, so why do you think that they did what they did when they did it?
Well, I think
Was
they
there a
did it because,
precipitating event besides what you had written about?
right. Well, for me, it's a long story, but it does connect into a high profile person in connection
Okay.
to the music industry. And I try not
Oh
to
my
like
God.
talk about the whole scenery because it's really just, it's so out there in the illusion of space time. But that is what triggered this whole scenario. So me reaching out and sending a book to somebody who's high profile triggered this event.
So
Now,
let me,
insofar as
obviously,
why
it
they did
doesn't
it,
sound like you expected any of this to come
no,
about. This like,
no, and I'm pretty psychic. So I mean, you have this radar system. I did not see this
uh-huh.
coming. I can honestly tell you, I never saw this coming on any timeline. I never anticipated
Okay.
anything like this happening to me. So that was really bizarre.
Interesting. Wow. See, that's what I'm saying, where people are like just like living their lives and you're thinking
Mhm.
nobody's paying attention,
Right.
except somebody is.
Well, and the thing is,
So,
after a while, you asked me why you think they did it. And I can tell you, after I
mm-hmm.
met my handler, I'm pretty sure it was for recruitment, for training, and to see how the technology worked, and so far as how they were able to utilize it through their own personnel. This type of technology is used for what I consider to be black sciences and technology for space programs. It can be used for
Uh-huh.
surveillance, where you don't need a cell phone. You have an interconnection, live feed real time with your communication system with the handler, operators, controllers, whoever's around, and you're literally communicating. And it's not like if people would get tagged with this stuff, most people would say, oh, they're being, they're schizophrenic, they're hearing voices. It's not like
Yeah.
that. This is a synthetic feed. It's literally a technological interface. And that is something that I don't think most people are aware of. And it's kind of concerning to me because most people wouldn't really understand how to decode this. They'd assume the other.
But let me ask you, and I guess the reason is, didn't they think that you were going to be resistant to this? Because, like you said, you have a life.
Hmm. Right.
Did,
Well, I thought I
didn't,
was, yeah, honestly, but the thing is, I was also very open-hearted on a spiritual level, so that when I was
okay.
started to get tagged with this and interface with it, I was more about the curious mind, the curious scientist of being unconditionally loving. Then I realized it was hostile. Their interface was hostile, and then I started fighting. And when I started to fight back even with my own mind, with the interface with the technology and the synthetic telepathy, if I didn't follow a command or if I didn't tolerate what they were communicating, they would
Right.
find ways to make disorientation. They would take you to the floor with a type of vertigo. It's a directed energy weapon, so they can literally make you disoriented. I mean, there's so many things they can do with this thing, and a lot of that was going on insofar as trying to break me down. But I wound up
Mm-hmm.
actually communicating and moving on and beyond the configuration of what they were trying to do, which was, it took a while, but I calibrated it. But in the meantime, I wasn't communicating verbally with my husband in 2004 when this whole thing started. He didn't know
Right.
what happened. He thought I was on drugs or something. I don't take drugs. I'm an athlete. So the whole idea behind that was, he didn't understand. And within 24 to 48 hours, I was extracted out of my house, just disoriented and in a hotel room. And the next thing I know, they're saying, go to a place of your choosing where I can get to, is what Michael told me. And so I went to Maui, and then he showed up on Maui. And then 4 months later, I was divorced. And I can honestly tell you, to be handled like that, an interface like that, you don't even have any control. I mean, you're communicating, you're thinking rationally in your own head, but you're being so bombarded with psychotronic warfare and synthetic
Mm-hmm.
telepathy and all kinds of other things that it's the most bizarre program I've ever experienced. Well, it's the only program I've ever experienced like that, and it really is something that destroys and completely obliterates people's lives.
So let me ask you,
So
they're doing
it's
this
something to be
without an implant. They're
documented.
doing this outside of you. They
It's a
built this
signal interface,
manipulation.
correct?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. This was a remote satellite driven technology, but what I did decode, but also, I don't know if you know who Steve Colburn is, and I
Mm.
encourage you to get him on your show because he's done a lot of implant analysis scans. He's worked with Dr. Roger Lear, the late Dr. Lear, who's long gone now. But the idea behind that is to find physical implants or things that have a deep space signal, anything. With him, he
Right.
actually had an implant, a physical. He did an implant analysis scan on me, and I had signals everywhere. So I
Okay.
know I have a kind of a sequencing connected to a signal interface array, but I am
Mm.
not certain it's actually hardwired like a real like the kind of implant he had. Let's put it that way. It's more synthetic, but it's more frequency based, in my opinion.
So I'm gonna ask you, all of this that they've done with you, is this, how's this? Is it here as far as regular like Earthlings, or is there any type of alien connection in this?
Well, to me, I wrote my book called Alien Intelligence, and
Mm-hmm.
that's about us being descendants of the visitors. And I'm not talking greys or reptiles, but literally being part of that whole sequencing connected to advanced DNA and evolution. What I see
Okay.
with this is that it's a reverse engineer technology. I see that they look for people who are like contactees or powerful
Mm-hmm.
mediums or psychics or anybody who has a gift of some kind that has a very powerful amplification with their electromagnetic field and aura. And with that, there's a frequency connection where they can hijack the signal, so to speak, interconnect, and then start driving the communication system. But with a lot of the other stuff, I didn't see extraterrestrials per se, but I was
Okay.
under the impression that this is definitely an exotic technology driven by people who are in beyond classification projects. And of course, my handler had a lot of clearances, so I'm very clear that this is a technology that has probably more than anomalous access to things that we've never seen before here in this realm.
Right. And you hear sometimes even from people that, when it comes to UFOs, and they're saying, you know what, a lot of these UFOs, everybody's thinking they're off planet, and maybe it's just like you said, technology that's been developed either by
Mhm.
private corporations or by governments. They're so way out there that we immediately assume that
Mhm.
they have to be ET in origin, and they're not.
No. That's my impression as well. And like I said, they were, you can't blame it on the devil or this. I know it sounds like you could, like you're
Right.
possessed and all this other stuff. And I can tell you another story about the Vatican because they have electronic warfare that mimics possession. So literally, you're remotely
Yes.
brain hacking a target and controlling them to make them look crazy once again. And all this is a real technology. There are patents and everything else associated with that. So yeah, from my experiences, I find that people also there's a collective here where they're very impressionable and they can be hit
Right.
with psychic imprinting insofar as psychological warfare goes. So one person has an experience with a quote unquote gray, and everybody else and their
Mm-hmm.
mother starts having that kind of connection on a dream pool level. I'm very suspicious of that after where I've been, insofar as how people perceive things. And I also know
Right.
psychotronic programs where they can interconnect you with a signal, and you'll start just like a television. You'll see
Right.
things that are connected to something that's not valid. So you have to be really careful of what's being shown to you. And I think a
So
lot of
basically,
psychics.
you're
Go ahead.
thinking, wow, this is for real. This is genuine. And it's like,
Right.
no.
Yeah, you have to validate it. And one thing that I can tell you where I've been with a tech, we validated the communication system. And when they were first interconnected with me, he told me his name, and I was like, "Who is this person?" Live feed real time. And later on, he physically met me. So it wasn't
Okay.
like spirit saying, "Oh, you're going to meet this person. This is his name." No, he was talking to me live feed real time interface, and he showed up. And we had a very in depth conversation about the tech. And then, of course, he lied under oath. It's a long story, and it's something I really don't like to get into because it's a long time ago. But my point is, if people want to know more about it, I have a documentary on it. It's called Eye the Remote, a disclosure in covert technology. And then also Eye the Remote, a book, Black Operations in Areas Beyond 52, I wrote to just kind of document everything.
Let me ask you, as far as, because we always think of, remote viewing, for example,
Hmm.
as, military or defense, being able to see what the enemy's doing. But
Right.
this sounds like this is beyond that,
Well, it is,
right?
but also the military knows what I know. They know this technology. They have to,
Right.
because what it does is it boots you up insofar as if you're really good at, say, like I said, if you're a good psychic or someone who's just good as a mentalist, you can literally be interfaced with this technology and be able to see through satellite systems and other things and literally remotely influence the idea behind remotely controlling, say, a ship of some kind or an aircraft. You can literally do that. I'm sure their pilots have been trained for this. But back in the day in 2004, I don't think they were looking into it at the level that they are doing it now. So back then, I was kind of like a little guinea pig test pilot for it. That's why I call myself a test pilot, because that's what I was. I was literally being indoctrinated into a program where this was beyond classification for different projects connected to what I would consider a space program and military, global military.
And I guess what I was coming to is like, were they trying to develop you as a spy?
Well, sci-fi
Outside of what you,
technology, yeah, but I don't think it was
okay.
intentional. I think it was training, and that I was getting
Mm-hmm.
so good at it that I just kind of just adapted into the field, so to speak, because I eventually started doing surveillance work on Maui, and I started doing security work and all these things
Right.
that I would have never, ever, ever done had I not been
Mm-hmm.
pulled into the program. And that was all my handler's background, all cyber warfare, all surveillance. And that's him. That's not me. That's him. But I adapted onto it because I was really good at it. I started being interconnected with the technology and understood how the remote viewing and the technology was running and how to communicate.
Right. And the reason why I'm saying is that we've seen lately a trend where private corporations are going beyond government control. You always thought
Hmm.
of the government or the military defense being the ones that would have all these, black projects or whatever. But I think a lot of corporations are saying, hey, you know what? Forget it. I'll do what I want. I'll
Hmm.
develop this technology and go with it. I
Yep.
don't care. I've got the funds for it. And I
Hmm.
think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of competition. I don't know if that's accurate, but
I think so too. There's a lot of private enterprise. And in my opinion, I think that's what happened in 2004. I mean, these were people that were high profile, but I also know their backgrounds were in connection to investments in this type of technology, even if it was for
mm-hmm.
their own protection. They were utilizing it, incorporating it, and then using it as a beta test on beings like myself. I don't know how many others were like me. I know my handler was like me initially. And,
Okay.
so there are things like that that go on. And insofar as like you could look at SpaceX, I mean, I look at the
Mm-hmm.
Neuralink because I'm like, that's nothing compared to where I've been. Nothing. That's like baby steps.
Okay.
So it's real interesting to see the technology and how it's morphing. But that's what the people are seeing. That's what just the regular Joes are saying.
Right, right.
They're not
Yeah, that's
seeing
what we see.
classified. So what I'm
Oh,
talking about is
sure.
beyond classification. This is pretty much, in my opinion, something that will be deployed as a kind of a generic at some point in space time here, probably in the next 5 or 6 years, if you ask me.
Right, because I'm thinking, and let me ask you, what were they also trying to do with you? See how far they could develop you?
I think
You
it
know, how
was
far?
just yeah, beta testing, everything. I mean, whether it was remote viewing, also the idea behind me being a healer, mapping my brainwave activity was utilizing and seeing what I was doing in order to use my system for healing, like what I call the
Okay.
healing body. So if you're
Mm,
sending energy to a certain part of your body, they would map everything. It's just like they're data mining everything you're doing. I think that's part of it, and also the idea behind training a target and studying a target and seeing what they're capable of. I was able to do a lot of things, and I can tell you, after I started kind of reconfiguring my life and breaking orbit with being controlled, I had
okay.
access to things where I would see like real time. It's just like you're looking through a satellite, except
Right.
it was my eyes. I could literally see through the satellite systems. It's wild, and I can tell you that that's the tech. That's an interface that should be respected. It shouldn't be a type of thing where people are using it as a weapon system or to harm or control or manipulate somebody. But I think that was just me learning to adapt and change things. So I'm not sure I was even supposed to be able to do that, but I was. And this was
Right.
it's real interesting to see. But I also know after all these years, because it's been 20 years for me, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been a long time. And now that I'm older and everything's kind of either kind of what I consider to be integrated a little bit, but also there was a lot of what I call aerial warfare around here where they were trying to disable a lot of this stuff or kind of remove or break up some of the energies so that I wasn't able to access so much of their stuff. And of course, I think some of that happened, and a lot of it is still, I do my own thing.
And this is the thing that, you think of, and you know that I'm sure you've seen that movie Minority Report
Oh
where they
yeah,
have
yeah,
the psychics
yeah.
and they kind of have the main girl and the other two guys are just like her helpers, but they're not as good as her.
Hmm.
Okay. And they basically got them stashed away, issuing out, these reports or whatever they were about what was going to happen.
Hmm.
Like,
Right.
we found these highly psychic individuals and we're going to capture them and we're going to keep them to issue these minority reports.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
almost like what it sounds like, we need to find these type of individuals,
Right. Well, that's how they do
whatever their
threat
agenda
assessment.
is.
And also the idea behind looking onto timelines and being able to assess somebody on the timeline. I don't know about you, but
Right.
I'm really good at profiling people naturally. And so
Okay.
with the interface, it just seemed like everything was very fluid. And of course, you have an interface of communication. I think the biggest part of that tech is the ability to communicate with somebody wherever they are on this map of the world. And
Okay.
nobody knows the better. And you're interfacing live feed real time and communication system with a signal interface, just like a cell phone, but nobody knows what's going on. I think that's
Right.
that's beyond fascinating. But yeah, they do try to recruit psychics and mediums and anybody who's a channel, in my opinion, or anybody who's
Mm-hmm.
advanced, even brilliant minds. I mean, people who are very, very intelligent, even if they're not psychic, will get recruited, but they are easier, in my opinion, to control to some degree because they're too logical to some degree. They don't consider what's going on. They don't really comprehend what's happening to them. So they allow things to manipulate them further. And I've seen a lot of people that are contactee types like that, where they obviously have had some kind of experience with something beyond this realm, and then they get kind of pulled into something that's more government related, and also they become more drone like. So it is what it is.
Let me ask you, I don't, and the reason why I ask is that, nowadays with all this technology of the phones or whatever, everything can be scanned and overheard.
Mm-hmm.
Can they overhear or monitor when you're communicating with somebody via this system?
Well, with that system, with synthetic telepathy, no, and it's encrypted, so nobody can break that signal insofar as interrupt and hear what, say, myself or my handler were communicating interface. It'd have to be
Right.
somebody who's a witness to it, or someone in the room, so to speak, who was able to
Right.
access this whole data stream. But for beings like us, I mean, if they wanted to access you remotely, they could more
Right.
than likely do that by just creating an aerial mapping around you, mapping your electromagnetic field, your neurocircuitry, and just running a feed and just listening. They don't have to ping you for a communication system. They pinged me. They first they started the surveilling, and then they went hardwired in right into the interface, which was shocking. But for they
Okay.
can definitely dial in and listen to people, and that's not to create paranoia. Everybody knew. I mean, when people know that you can, there's a capability. Obviously, anybody can be looked at from a distance remotely, with surveillance and this, that, and the other, especially in
Right.
your
Right.
residence. There's no such thing as privacy anymore, unless you have a Faraday
Right.
cage beyond a Faraday cage.
Right. Because as technology advanced, you even heard of these, besides putting a tap on somebody's location, you had these cameras that could be shooting, they could be on the other side of the block, and they could get a
Hmm.
close up of what was going. But and the reason why I'm asking you this is, if there's a way that you could ever be communicating with somebody and say, I'm going to make sure, not that they don't can ping you and find you where you're at, but that they can actually know what it is that you're communicating or listening to or receiving.
Right.
Or
Well, the
you the one
interface.
that has to go ahead and divulge the information back to them?
Oh, well, the interface live feed real time, they would definitely data mine the information.
Okay.
So with real time information, yeah, they were completely data mining everything. That's why I said I made a good spy in a sense of I was just a walking bug. So wherever I
Okay.
went, I hate to say compromised, but I was being interconnected to such a degree that, whatever I went, they were there, whether people liked it or
Wow.
not. That's like big time covert assessment. And what's interesting, even when I worked in, like, I was doing like security work on Maui, and my boss, he used to work for the police, and then he was my boss over there at the surveillance and security. He called me one day and said, there's a star over your house. I never understood what he was saying, but I have a feeling it had something to do with satellites or something. But I was just, it went over my head at the time. But there's all
Right.
this weird stuff they do, like tongue in cheek, kind of almost cryptic, that you just kind of go
Okay.
along with the program eventually. But you pick up on what people are saying. Like, everybody's in the know, but you're kind of still on the outside, but being interconnected with all this.
Okay. So in other words, I see what you're saying, that after a while you're like, okay, one way or another, there's
Well, I
there's
got
no
used
place
to
to
it.
hide. There's no shady spot.
No, there's no shade. There's no place to go. There's no place to run or hide from the tech. I can say it can be very abusive, and that's the thing. You've heard of targeted individuals before, probably.
Yes.
So that is a
Yes.
real thing. I tracked targeted individuals for a very long time, very similar to where I've been, but not the same, because I was being recruited and trained, as it would appear. These guys were just being tortured nonstop with an electronic feedback program, and that feedback was to such a degree that they literally took their lives. Some people couldn't handle the duress of the program, and they weren't crazy. That's the worst part of this. So they
Right.
were, they're just gone now. Nobody knows the better. It's terrible.
Right. Right. You know, and I'm thinking, I imagine these target individuals, it could be something they know, something they
Right.
wrote,
And pissing off the wrong person. I had a few
Yeah,
come to
of
me,
course.
and a lot of them knew high profile people. Some were in the government, and they were sure that it had something to do with them just maybe making somebody unhappy. And all of a sudden, they're
Mm-hmm.
starting to remotely, create this feedback electronic program to harass them. And that goes on and on and on. You can't break those signals up. They're very hard to disable. You have to really pound somebody with the technology, and insofar as trying to disable some of that stuff once they get started with these divisions. It goes on
Okay.
for years, years and years. I mean, mine
Yeah.
lasted, of course, it was different, but I mean, I went 20 years plus, plus or minus, through this program. And then with
All
the
right.
past 4 years, the signals started morphing and changing dramatically. I still have an anomaly signal, but I don't have the hardwiring that I had with the crazy back in 2004.
I was gonna tell you, didn't well, obviously but didn't you think at some point, I'm going crazy?
Well, I knew
What's
I
wrong
wasn't
with me?
crazy. This is the thing. I knew that I wasn't insane, and we confirmed the technology. I talked to
Mm-hmm.
Preston Nichols back in the day. I confirmed it with my handler, and then I actually had an SA lawyer, and we all knew what was going on, but we couldn't do anything about it because it was that kind of a black technology, and the people were too high profile. There was a lot going on behind the scenes, so I knew I wasn't losing my mind. And what I did do, I kept diving into MK Ultra, like reading every book I could find on it, and really
Okay.
talked to developers, all kinds of people to try to understand what I was dealing with on a technological level. And the one thing that gave me relief was actually getting it looked at by someone like Steve Colburn, where I knew the signals were
Okay.
there, and I still know. I can tell. And I remember when
Right.
they put one signal in near my chest cavity when in my bedroom that night. And I can tell you it felt like a surgery, and it was actually quite painful. And I still have
Okay.
that signal. So these are things absolutely that are real, and you know you're not losing your mind. But for people around you, oh, they don't have a clue. And I loved my husband back in the day. I mean, I would have never left him. No way. But yet at the
Right.
same time, I'm extracted in trauma out of my residence, and I call it an electronic kidnapping. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. That you're under so much duress, you just follow the command of the program of the handler,
Okay.
and you literally go. So when you're talking about, I think you were talking about in your previous shows, the weird in Hollywood or the music industry, or anything else. I mean, there's a lot that
Mm-hmm.
goes on that
Oh
people don't
yeah.
know about. And when people start all of a sudden acting strange, I think I'd look at that on a whole different level of what are they being exposed to? Is it a drug, biochemical thing? Is it psychosis, or is there something else going on like this, right?
Let me ask you, is there any point that they just let you go that you're like, okay, thanks,
Well,
we've used you?
I think that I'm older now, so they've really, I think it is like that. They put you in the junkyard. I'm not in the junkyard to say, but I
Yeah, I
feel
know
like,
what you, yeah, but it's like,
the older you get, the less you are, accessible or an asset to them, in my opinion. But also after I
right.
testified in 2006, things were still ramped up until like probably past, I'd say 5 years ago, 2020,
Oh,
things started to
all right.
alter a little bit. But yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, but I was learning to kind of fly alone with the tech. So they left me alone. They kind of let it go black, and they didn't bother me until I started working on all these cool projects like my Orion Gateway project, and looking at things beyond this configuration of space time. And then they got nervous, and then I started seeing more and more aircraft around my residence and aerial craft.
Okay.
And I complained about it. I mean, I have a radio show and I talk about it all the time because I knew something was up. These weren't regular airplanes. So, and you can tell.
Right.
But some of that, but yeah, I think eventually they decide that, we've got what we need. We can make these templates. We can reproduce this. We don't need her as a test pilot or a target in any formula. So yeah, unless they're working with you, like if you're recruited into their department, they'll keep you around until you
And the
retire.
reason why I'm asking is you're talking about it. Nobody's
Yeah.
ever said, hey, don't talk about that.
Oh yeah. Even my lawyer said I had a big mouth, and he worked for national security back in the day. He was a federal lawyer, but he used to work for national security. And don't even, you can't make this up. How did I meet this guy? I met him through a friend. I had no idea he was ex national security. Well, you know anything
Okay.
about those divisions, they're never retired. Okay. So
Yeah.
even if he said he doesn't work for them anymore, he really kind of,
Yeah.
whatever. So, but he was a strong arm, and I really appreciated him at the time. I think my handler could have just come clean and said something, but he was under, I'm sure he was under a secrecy insofar as not being able to communicate.
Sure.
So, I kind of caught them in a sense of, I wanted to disclose it because the way it happened was wrong. You don't kidnap people out of their homes with electronic devices and remote satellite systems and extract them out of their program, out of their homes for a program like that in trauma. That's not
Mm-hmm.
appropriate. And this is America, at least, you know what I mean? So
Right. Right.
I
Like,
thought it
yeah,
was
you're like,
something that I needed to communicate. And of course, yeah. And so they haven't taken me down, but I think that all my data is out there. There's not much they can do. And nowadays,
right,
everybody
right.
and
And
their mother
and
talks
it's
about
different
stuff.
when you volunteer for something. It's like,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
okay. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go
Right.
ahead. I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
But
They should have
when
knocked on my
you're,
door. Yeah. And asked me point blank, said, would you like to, would you like to experience this technology or anything, something that's more real time, like in person kind of stuff versus this kind of cloak and dagger type of stuff.
right, right. That's why I'm thinking, wow, they've, and that, let me ask you, the people that, whether you, I don't know whether you want to call them handlers or whoever gives the orders, is there any type of sociopathic or psychopathic flavor to these
Oh,
personalities
absolutely.
or,
They're crazy as hell. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Maybe I can't say that, but my point is that, in my opinion, they're narcissistic. They're sociopaths. They enjoy torturing people, controlling,
Okay.
manipulating them, and even sexually assaulting them because a lot of that
Really?
technology can hit your chakra systems to a point where you don't
Uh-huh.
want to be excited about anything, but they're trying to push it. You know what I mean?
Right,
They
right,
have all
right.
kinds of strange things. And in my opinion, I think that's used for monarch programming. So once again,
Okay.
to be programmed and kind of entrained into responsive to certain situations and conditions. So yeah, there's something wrong with them. Okay. There's something wrong with
Okay.
them. I don't think they should have access to this tech at all.
Right.
The
No,
ones
no, no. You're
that do
basically
things like
talking
that.
about the
Yeah.
ultimate behavior modification, even if it's against the person's emotional make or mental makeup, you
Hmm.
know,
Right.
which
Yeah.
equates to torture for a person.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Well, my lawyer called it that. I mean, it was definitely a type of an abuse and torture remotely done. Absolutely. It's a directed
Yes.
energy weapon any way you look at it. I know they talk about the Havana syndrome, and that's nothing
Yes.
compared to this because this is interconnected. So I almost laughed at some of the, and not in a bad way, but in a sense of, oh, poor Secret Service, they got hit with that and that made them dizzy and maybe caused it brain inflammation or something. I've had stuff interconnected with me, and I can tell you I had radiation problems, radiation sickness. I had all kinds of things. And a guy from Special Forces, this was back in like 2010 or 2012, told me what to do to clear it because I was getting sick. I had clear like discharge out of my sinus cavity from the interconnection
Really.
and the duress of oh yeah, you wouldn't believe the stuff I've been through. And nobody knows the better. Nobody knows me, really. I mean, they do, but they don't. Because that case was shoved under the carpet so quick and so fast
Okay.
because of the high profile people involved.
So, and I was going to ask you, what happens? Is there anything anybody can do to say, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to like pay, or are you like at their mercy? Like you
Well,
got to go for
if
the
you,
ride.
I think if they decide to interconnect you the way they did to me, they weren't about to disconnect anything on me in 2004. I can tell you point
Okay.
blank. And I even said in my documentary, I didn't want to die like this. Point blank. I said, I don't want to die like this because it
Okay.
just was so compromising and so strange. And so you don't have any, you have control, but you don't. I mean, it's the strangest feeling. It's like being part of the Borg. And that's the only way I can describe it.
Right.
It's not normal. There are things that you can't, it's like they don't want you to cry because if you start to cry, they'll create a redirect in the signal so that you're not showing emotions. I mean, I can go on and on about how they do this. So no, it's not pretty in any formula.
So there's nothing that you could, how's this? There's no mental, I don't know, exercise gymnastic that you could say, I'm going to develop this and I'm going to be able to block their
Oh, I did that
manipulation. You
after,
did.
but it took me years to do that.
Right.
And I was before this. Remember, I was doing martial arts and teaching martial arts, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand prana. I understand the Merkaba, universal life force energy, and how I work with my meditations. And that didn't do anything. The whole time they were just mapping me when I was doing all my
Okay.
meditations and all those things. But I later on decided to it's kind of reconfigure the program is what I call it, because I started
Uh-huh.
pushing back hard and I started
Uh,
shutting it down as soon as it started to come in, as far as the communication. Initially, there's a live feed real time agent. And later on, they can put in like what I call a feedback program to just kind of keep the line interface going. And that I would
mm-hmm.
shut down all the time. So I did get control over it, but it took me several years. It took me a while to get
Okay.
control. And honestly, I can look
Okay.
back at my life on now and say, wow, I can't even believe I went through that. It's
All
amazing.
right. Yeah, but I'm thinking most people, like you said, don't realize what's the origin of whatever they're
Exactly.
experiencing.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. If it was anybody who probably, me, I'm kind of curious. Plus, I'm advanced in the area of metaphysics. So I know
Uh-huh.
spirit. I know how spirit works. And well, for me anyway, I knew this was a technological feed. There was no doubt in my mind. I just knew it was man made. So that was my
Okay.
relief on that level. But for regular people who get tagged with this, oh, they'll think they're losing their minds or they're having some kind of an aneurysm or something. And that's another thing. It can create health problems for people if they don't understand what they're
Right.
dealing with the interface. It can destroy people's lives and take them down.
Let me ask you, have you ever heard of anybody thinking that they're possessed because they don't understand what's going on with them?
Yeah, absolutely. We had all kinds of people like that. As a matter of fact, people thought I was. I mean, they were lighting candles for me, and a few people,
Wow.
and I was like, it's a technology, but I don't reject prayers. That's fine if you want to pray.
Right.
But point is, I mean, that's the go to. I mean, people don't understand. So, there's nothing wrong with going to spirit or going to creator, God, whatever. I
Right.
definitely kept my affirmations. I kept trusting spirit, trusting the cosmos, trusting source, divine creator, God, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I never lost that ever.
Okay.
But at the same time, I became so fierce and so angry. And I started channeling that energy to such a level that I started writing my books. And I fought back also through my books and through testifying and through getting on the radio and getting on my radio
Okay.
show and this, that, and the other.
So let me ask you, the origin of this technology, is it human as we're got so smart, or is there an ET origin for developing
Hmm.
this technology?
Well, for me, I would say it's a reverse engineer technology. But as I mentioned earlier, I believe we are the hybrids naturally. So we're hardwired to be able to interface like this. I've talked to other
Okay.
people who are like Dr. Richard Allen Miller, for example, and he'll tell you he's sure that there are extraterrestrial origin technologies that are similar. But I can't confirm any of that. I mean, I can only confirm where I've been. So I believe there's a
So
lot of
do you
different
think then
sequencing.
that they've hybridized
Oh yeah, I think
some or
everybody's a
all of us
hybrid.
just so that they'll be able, like, in other words, uh, this is going to work best on a hybrid. So we got to get a
Right.
hybrid out there. If not, how, the electrical plug is not going to work. So,
Right. No, it's true because as I said earlier, if you're doing the spiritual path working, whatever it is, or if a natural DNA sequencing like a contact E type or what I call a star being, you definitely
mhm,
are different insofar as your field and your electromagnetic field and your state of consciousness. So you're able to be, in my opinion, you adapt easier, you calibrate easier, and you're able to interface easier. That's just my opinion. For
right,
regular people, I think it would be a little more challenging and a little more difficult.
right, exactly. That's why I'm saying that. Because you always hear, one of the theories as far as, from abductees, contactees, everything, they have these stories of, our DNA being used, hybrid
Right.
beings. You always
Yeah.
think to yourself, why? Why?
Well, they
And
can
it
clone.
makes
I mean, yeah. I mean, the whole idea about us being cloned, we can take snapshots of everything. And actually, our templates, our DNA signature and template, once they interconnect you and interface you, they can take your brainwave activity, everything, and put it on a template for AI, artificial intelligence, and create a simulated template for something else. They can even use that template to download it onto someone else, so they can have everybody else's memory. So they could take that template and then interface it onto another target. All of a sudden, they're getting information. They say, "Oh, it might be a past life. Maybe not. Maybe it's just a feed from somebody else." So this is another thing. I mean, there's so
wow,
many advanced levels, and of course, it can take and
wow.
I think it does have an exotic extraterrestrial origin, if you ask me, in a
You're
sense of.
thinking,
Oh,
this
go
is my
ahead.
past life, and it's not really.
Right. That's why you become a skeptic. And for me, I've always been very into the psychic world. I grew up in it. My
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother was very powerful clairvoyant, so it was the norm for me to be in that realm of spirit. And that's why when you get hit with something that's not the norm technologically,
Right.
you just know.
Okay. Right. Well, and the reason why I say this is, I was a hypnotherapist for many years, and I did a lot of past life regressions.
Hmm.
And like, uh, you had a lot of people that had expectations, like, oh, I know I was live during this time, but the majority of the times they'd end up experiencing things that they had no familiarity with.
Hmm.
No, they were like, they'd come out and they'd be like, what was that?
Right.
Like, because like, I was Scarlett O'Hara, and the old South is like, no, you were a Greek sailor, you
Isn't that
know.
interesting? Well, the database is fascinating, and I still think we have the cellular recall and memory of our ancestors. So that's something to
Yes,
factor in, especially if you're doing regression, because they could be
yes,
tapping into something from another ancestor, yet seeing through the eyes
right,
of the
right, right.
ancestor. I mean, that's another
Yes,
level. That's a whole different thing. But yeah, there's so many things, and people can have screen memories, programs, synthetic programs, what I call synthetic alters. That's another thing. If you're doing hypnosis, you might get a synthetic alter come out, and that they
yes,
and sometimes contactees have those. A lot of
yeah,
them do.
I've come across stuff like that.
Yeah,
I've come across
I'm
stuff like
sure.
that. That's like, oh, what? Yeah, yes, and I know because I used to do like regular hypnosis, like smoking cessation,
Hmm.
like regular behavior modification, like eating and stuff like that. But I did go into alternative hypnosis, and you do come across scenarios like that.
Hmm.
As far as once you go there, it's not your regular stuff that you come across.
Right.
It's we're like, all human beings are like little Pandora boxes. We
Yeah, it's
really are.
amazing. It's vast, it's infinite, depending on the
Yes.
frequency also. So if they change their frequency, they're going to change the state of consciousness too. So then you get a whole different level, right? It's amazing to
Yes.
me.
Let me ask you, do you think that they're ever, or have they done anything like on a mass, um what's instead of individually, like on
Mhm,
a
like a mass
mass
collective.
level?
I would
Yeah.
say they have the capability absolutely to do it. I think they're
Mm-hmm.
doing more social engineering through media, through network, through
Yeah,
regular
yeah, that, yeah.
television.
Yeah, that I
That's
can
going
see that.
on. So that maybe they
Yes.
don't feel the need to do a whole like hive collective,
Right.
but I can guarantee you they have frequencies to interconnect on a global scale to synchronize everybody into some kind of a mind control or at least a behavior
Right.
modification. And sure enough, I mean, everybody has a cell phone. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
one way to entrainment, right? So think about it
Yes.
on that level as well.
Right. I mean, even the beats on a music, even if
Hmm.
when people used to go to theaters, not that they do anymore, but certain beats of music will put you into a hypnotic state, like open up, bring down your
Right.
filters
Yep.
and help you take in, that usually we might have a filter that kind of questions things. Well, certain music beats will bring that down.
Right.
More people than others, but overall, so yeah, I know that there's a lot of ways that they could do it, like you said, via media, entertainment.
Hmm.
God knows, especially with this.
Right. Well, even the food you have nowadays, everything's being modified. So I'm not sure to what
Yes.
level they're putting whatever they're putting in the food supply, but I think it can be anything and anyone. I mean, at this point in space time, they can be pulled in.
So, what do you think, knowing now what you know, what do you think is going to be the end goal? Or are they just going to keep using it just in whatever it is that they're doing behind the
Well,
scenes? Because obviously we're not aware of it.
right. For the most part, people are, but I think alternative media is definitely aware of the type of tech I talk about. I would say that initially, I think they're trying to create their own breakaway civilizations and keep this
Okay.
technology to themselves to some degree. I'm seeing a lot of sanitization of contactee information on the internet as of recent. For the past 4 years, I've
Okay.
been watching this. I've watched Arrow come in and take kind of like the helm when it comes down to discrediting UFOs and contactees and a lot of other things. So
Right.
I know that's going on. So the idea behind this type of technology, the bad guys would use it for control and manipulation for sure, and shutting people
Right.
down, keeping you
Right.
dim, and keeping you tortured if you don't comply with their command programs on a global
Sure.
scale. I guarantee you, if the bad guys get this tech and utilize it to the level I know it can be used, people will be completely indoctrinated into torture, electronic torture. If
Oh,
it's not being used that way, I mean, on a higher scale, we can use it for space projects and synthetic telepathy communication system and the good things we can do with it. So that's what I'm looking at. The good guys need to have access to this, and people who want to learn about it or even want to experiment with it should have an option, but not be tortured with it. So that's what I see.
let me ask you, do you think that that it obviously, we're talking here planetary.
Mhm.
Could it ever be used for further distances off planet, or
Oh,
you don't
sure.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. I know it can be used for off-planet intelligence networks and systems. That's what I've written about in my books. I have
Okay.
alien intelligence. I've written about it, and also my other book, Cosmic Travelers: An Analysis of Time Travel. So I'm very clear this can be used for off-planet intelligence, which is why beings like me, I mean, when we get pulled into these programs, after a while, you become so used to it, the tech,
Mm-hmm.
that you want to go home, and home isn't here. It becomes like off-world. It's the weirdest
Okay.
thing. It's not mind control. It's just that you become so adapted onto other things beyond this configuration that you just want to go home. And I don't know if if you've talked to a lot of people when you do your work with them, if they ever
Mm-hmm.
say that. Like contactees have a tendency to do that, but I totally understand why they say it. I totally get it now. So it's really
I,
interesting.
I've had people that have told me, I've had dreams of a place that I know is not Earth, but that felt like home.
Right? Yeah. It's like
And it
there's
was like
something
they
beyond.
could tell me, and by the way, this was from really grounded people
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
that
they're not
told me
losing their
that.
minds, but think about
Yeah.
multidimensional space. But think the idea behind there is no time, and the illusion of time is a benchmark of measure here. There is no
Yeah.
distance in the illusion of distance. It's based on frequency, right? So people do have the capability to traverse the galactic highway. Some have recall, some don't. I find that they're trying to create so many barriers with this weaponization of what I call low Earth orbit that they're trying to keep people in a stasis here. They don't want people moving on without a clearance from national security to do so. And me, I fight that tooth and nail. I'm like, no, I want to traverse the galactic highway, and especially after where I've been, I'm not having you pull me down and keep me here when I choose to navigate and explore. That's just me. But my point is that's what I see here going on.
Let me ask you, because I know that a lot of contactees or abductees, they after a while they realize that there's also a familial kind of connection. Have you ever
Mhm.
found out if any of your family members experienced something along those lines?
It's kind of funny. I always felt like Harry Potter in the illusion of my family, I should say, but I do have sisters that are what I consider to be, I think they have had experiences but don't have recall. But then none of them
Okay.
were pulled through a program like where I've been. None.
Okay.
But I can
Okay.
tell you that they seem to be connected to some form of a divine energy, whether that's through their belief systems or I think it's contactee type stuff. I think there's something in the DNA, but it's
Right.
I speak a different language than they do, but that's
Right.
my
Right.
observation.
And sometimes I've even heard of people that, not till they're adults, do they start talking about it and they realize they all had comparable experiences as kids.
Hmm. Yeah,
But they don't talk about it until they're older.
right. It's like
And then
there's
they
a screen
realize they were
memory.
having these parallel experiences.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot to be said about those screen memories that are put there to keep it as a buffer. And then eventually
Hmm.
those fall away and people start having recall. I think that's always going to happen to everyone here. So I would be prepared for that too. I think a lot of people have had experiences they probably don't remember, missing time and everything else.
Yes, and you hear a lot about that, about people that, again, I want to call them normies that
Hmm.
start having these moments, like you said, of missing time, and they're like,
Right.
how did that happen?
Right. Exactly. And it's all
This is
frequency
like
related.
hours sometimes where they
Hmm.
can't, they're like, it's not like you walk into a room, it's like, oh, I forgot what, no, I'm talking about hours.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. They went somewhere. It's like that movie
Yeah,
Contact, where they don't believe she did anything, but there was a tape that had all this like white noise, right?
right.
That is exactly how it works, in my opinion.
Do you think or do you know if there's like either an inter or intra-dimensional aspect to any of this, as far as, you hear about parallel universes
Hmm.
or anything like that, or you don't know as
Well,
far
I
as.
can I can tell you that it does go into alternate realities and timelines, just because, first of all, I look at it like if you're on a primary timeline, what I call the primary timeline of your life,
Mm-hmm.
and something rips you away from that, you're automatically
Right.
creating a split. That's what happened to
Yes.
me. I went to another alternate reality. So I could tell you
Okay.
there's parallel bleed through. There's all kinds of energetic things that can happen on a multidimensional scale through that. And with that reminder that this is electronically driven, it's technologically driven. So that creates synthetic fields. So in my opinion, yes, we have all kinds of multiple realities that are synthetic spin-offs of where we were supposed to be from point A. So in my opinion, yeah, I think we get that. We get parallel bleed through. We get all kinds of things, when it comes down to,
Let me ask something. When they pulled you out, how's this? Did time try to correct? In other words, that's what I'm trying to say is, because you get into the thing of like, what happened to you? Was that supposed to happen to you, or did they pull you out or away from what should have been your life course? And if they did that, did it try to correct itself? It's
well,
like
it's
it's kind of
interesting.
those things like, what's it going to
Right.
happen to you no matter what?
Well, that's the thing. Like I said, I didn't see it coming, and that's one thing. I was so
Mm-hmm.
happy and blissful that I wanted to be in that space. This purpose, I'm not sure, but I can tell you that it's changed a lot of things here on the realm. As far as just being able to
Okay.
disclose this type of technology changes
Okay.
everything. It's just, and I'm not
All
just
right.
speaking of myself, but whenever you go into a world like that and you bring your light and your consciousness into that technology, part of me is in
Right.
there, even though I had some of that in me. But I was an influence to the field. I was an influence to a lot of things. So I think maybe in the illusion of maybe there was something behind the perimeter that I didn't know about, that source had in mind, to have me go through that. But honestly, there should have been an easier route, in my opinion. I don't know. But then I look back at my life, and I could, if I look at my what I call my ex husband now, right? He's been remarried, and it didn't take him long to
Right.
remarry. So that was another thing. I'm like, well, thankless job, right? So you look at it on that level, like maybe it was supposed to be. I don't know. But at the same time, it was a very traumatic event that could have, in my opinion, it didn't have to go the route it went with this cloak and dagger, and
Mm-hmm.
the abusive aspects to it could have not been there, that kind of
Right,
stuff.
right, right. And that's why I guess my question is, when they go, basically, for lack of a better word, they interfere with your life, because I always have the belief, and I might be mistaken, that if you interrupt somebody's timeline, time will try to make it right,
Right.
especially.
If I can see that here on this realm, in the illusion of, I should say. But with me, I think everything reset itself with off-world intelligence networks and systems. So I
Okay,
was pulled into a different space-time configuration, in my opinion. Even, and the
okay,
disorientation was part of that. But for me, I think that's what happened. Life can't be, it's kind of self-replicating on a level. So you see yourself as kind of seeing people over again, or you go to a place that's familiar, but it's still not the same. Nothing is the same anymore. So I don't think it tries to reset itself the way we want it
right. And,
to.
and the reason why I say this is, I know there's some theory that this is just for an example. Let's say your husband, your ex-husband, whatever, his destiny was supposed to have been to marry you, but something happened to you, got run over by a train, whatever. That, but it was something manipulated. How's that? Something that wasn't, that time would try to correct itself, and he would have married your sister.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? It wouldn't have been that he went off and he married somebody else. In other
Oh, I
words, that it
see.
tries to correct itself as much as
Right.
it can without bringing you back from the dead, that in that
Mhm.
hypothetical situation. So I was wondering, like you said,
Right.
like here your life is going this way, and all of a sudden it's totally, how can I say this? Because sometimes we do
Imploded.
things that bring stuff to occur. We bring it into reality.
Right.
Whether we
Mhm.
manifest it, hey, it's like this happened to you, but it sounds like everything that happened to you, you were like, I wasn't looking for this to I
No,
didn't
I
do
didn't see it
anything.
coming. I honestly didn't. And sending a book like Transmutation Through Ascension to somebody high profile, if you read my book, it's very nice. And the only reason I sent it was because there had been a loss in the family, and that's why I sent the book. It's a long story, but my point is that it's a
Okay.
very spiritual book and it's very uplifting. And when you
Okay.
mail stuff out, I don't think twice about it. I mail it and it's gone, and la la la, things move on. That's not what
Right.
happened. And I honestly, when I look at everything right now, is I find that my ex married somebody. I think it was a replacement model for me. Was it the
Mm-hmm.
right person? I think it was a fill-in. I think it's just somebody who stepped
Sure.
into the field. And with me, I was in a whole different orbit. I didn't have time to have any type of sadness about it. I was completely being indoctrinated with psychotronic weapon systems, so I didn't have time to even have any grief or happiness or joy or and nothing, no emotions there. So it's very, very interesting.
Wow. Let me tell you, talk about, your life going, because, sometimes, I'm sure you've heard of people having midlife crisis, and
Hmm.
but see, it's like their own decision. I'm going to go
Right,
and we're going to
right.
go
That was
climb Mount Everest or something like
right.
that.
Yeah, this wasn't my midlife crisis. I was quite happy.
Right,
So
right,
yeah,
right, right. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, it was really weird. And but I do see how they can use this against people. Whether it's me or somebody else, I can see how this technology works. And I think
Do
back in
you ever think that
2004
they
it was
might come
different.
back and say, "Hey, we need you back"?
No, they're not going to bother me. I doubt it. But I love the technology, and I would work with people with the interface with satellite systems off planet. I would love to do. Well, I'd like astronaut work. I know I'm old now in the illusion of, but I still like to work on those levels of tech. And but the people that are involved in these things should have been held accountable. I don't know if they ever were. I don't know if they ever will be. But I always say, the universe has a way of sorting things out too on that level. So.
Right. Right. Because, well, you see all these Hollywood things of these black projects and, black so black nobody knows that they're being
Hmm.
run. And you
Right.
always think, well, that's great fiction. But from what you're saying, it's not
No,
fiction.
it's not fiction, and I can tell you that beyond it's just that people don't know classified data, they don't understand it, and when we start to leak some of this data out, like
Hmm.
whistleblowers do, well, they get in a lot of trouble most of the time to even communicate some of this information. Sometimes they'll give it to you on the science fiction movies and this, that, and the other, but
Right.
yeah, this tech is real, and there's much more to it. I mean, there's all kinds of mind control connected to electronic warfare. If people don't like their neighbors, they can gaslight them with electronic stalking. All kinds of
Oh
things
my
go on.
God.
Madonna did it to one of her neighbors. I think it was, I can't remember what, this is a long time ago. She didn't like somebody. She gaslighted him with electronic warfare.
Really. But let me
Yeah.
ask you, I imagine you got to know somebody, that you say, hey, I want you to target my neighbor because for whatever. I mean, how do you find? Did
I
she
don't
do it, or
know.
or is she
I think
contracting
it's
somebody to
it's
do it?
people in the know. It's people in this kind of what I call the club, where they have access to
Hmm.
a lot of beyond cyber warfare, people with clearances who have access to things that can make everyone else's life miserable. And sometimes it goes all the way to the district, up there in DC. It depends on who these people are and who's been pissed off, how much power they have, what kind of organization
Well,
it
well,
is.
that's what I was
And of
gonna
course,
say. I imagine you gotta have some
yeah.
type of pull, or be some type of mover or
Oh, yeah.
shaker
They
that
definitely
you
have
could.
connections, and he did. My handler did have connections to DC. He worked
Mm.
for several presidents back in the day. So yeah, he did. These people had an access to things that could have made it run. So it is. But was
Let
it
me ask you
malicious
something. There
intent?
was there ever like a, battle of the egos? Because those personalities have their egos. Where
Right.
it's like,
You
hey, we
mean
want to
with
target this person, and somebody goes, no, but that's my no, you can't do that. Well, why can't we?
well,
One of those deals.
right. I don't know if that was in my case. I mean, it seemed to me like they were all in for it as far as,
Okay.
interconnecting me into the tech. I don't know if they had good angels on my side. I wanted to
Hmm.
believe I did. And I think there were good beings there in between space time. I'm not sure if they were supernatural. I mean, I knew
Okay.
I was being protected and guided at the same time as being traumatized and tortured and interconnected with this technology that I couldn't escape from. So it was a very interesting journey.
Right, which is like one of those things that I think a lot of people have sometimes what they call lapses in faith, because
Hmm.
they find themselves in these situations where they're thinking, man, nobody's coming to rescue me.
Right.
That kind of situation.
Yeah.
So
Then
they
you
kind of
rescue
lose
yourself.
faith
Right.
in, how's this, in anything positive as far as their existence. How's that?
Right. No, I agree with you. I never lost faith. I just stepped up. I just became co-creator and just started fighting. I put on my armor and I just started,
Okay.
just going. I wasn't the type to just kind of, let myself expire or anything. I'm a fighter. So I'm a natural fighter. So the thing for me is to just power up and keep going. And that's what I did. And then, you realize that what you realize about the faith thing is that you realize the
Mm-hmm.
system is so corrupt that it's never going to help you. That's what I realized. That when I
Okay.
testified in court, how toxic and how criminal everything is, that you can't ever get ahead in a criminalized system like that. Maybe
Sure.
some people can, but this was like everything was bought and sold. There was no point in even having to testify because it was all set up anyway. I mean, that's the thing. It's really sad, but that's what happens when you start communicating the truth. They'll shut you down and shut you up real quick.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. When you started writing books and then, you say your radio show, weren't you like concerned, like, hey, there's going to be blowback on this?
Well, I was just interconnected and I would just get out there and communicate the truth. They never, I mean, once in a while we'd have problems with obviously with the show going live, this, that, and the other, but I never had any real time
Mm-hmm.
threats made. Let's put it that way. So
Okay.
whether they were doing it for their amusement or they figured I wasn't a threat, he did give me a threat assessment in the early days. He did say I was a threat and he did call me a level 3 threat at the time. But later on,
Okay.
that all moved. That's not because I turned him in, as I'm supposed to
Right,
do.
right, right. Like
So.
nobody ever came and said, okay, you could talk about this, but don't ever talk about that.
Well,
Okay,
that's the
because if
thing
you
is,
ever
I didn't
talk
work for
about
those
that,
companies. Yeah, I didn't work
uh,
for their organization, So if they
right.
had told me, it's been a whole different deal if I was pulled into this program or recruited
Mm-hmm.
properly, I guess you could say. But no,
Okay. And how about, have you come across other people like you
not with the kind of
that
tech. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
you didn't, in other words, like, oh, you're one of those, like, like
Well, I think I'll go ahead. I keep cutting you off.
that
I'm
you didn't
sorry.
recognize. How's this? That, that maybe somebody like yourself that has been through that scenario and is now moved, shielded themselves, if you want to call it that.
I don't know anybody who's been through the program I've been through, but I'm sure there are people who
Really?
have been pulled into projects that are connected to something similar. Let's put it that way. I have never met
Okay.
anybody who's had the same exact technological interface that I've had or the anomaly
Okay.
signals I have, with the exception of my handler. I know who's been interconnected, and some others that are part of that high profile community. I do not know anybody who's willing to come forward and talk about it now.
And the reason why I was going with this is I was thinking, do they ever put together teams? Like, hey, we're all going to train you because we want a
Mhm.
team aspect to this. They never had
Oh, I
anything
think
like
so.
that.
Well, I think that's part
Yeah.
of where I've been because I was interconnected with him, Live Feed Real Time, and a couple others that were there, Live Feed Real Time. So there was definitely a
Mm-hmm.
hive, a miniature hive, I would say. There was definitely that kind of thing going on, which felt like a team. I had all kinds of cool things going on the level of surveillance and security, where I'd be, I felt very confident insofar as being protected. And the way you're operating with these systems, I mean, you feel very fortified with the technology when you're doing surveillance and security work. So that's the team aspect, I'm sure, that you're
Okay.
describing.
Right, 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 right. As far as, you know, and you know where I'm going with this, either because, these set of people, you're all very alike in your either the way your mind works or your brain is wired. So we've collected all of you because we're going to train you in this methodology
Hmm.
to
Well, I think
get.
we are. Yeah, I think you're right on that. And one thing I can tell you is that when you get interconnected with this live feed real time, you take on some of the characteristics of your handler or anybody else who's been
Okay.
interconnected with you. So I actually knew more than I probably should through my handler and his access, to be honest with you, because I was able to go through his firewall. And I'm sure that didn't make him feel very comfortable.
Okay.
I,
All
I, I
right.
felt like I
Yeah.
was actually being a lot like him on a lot of levels. I mean, I felt a lot like him. I wasn't trying to be, but I was being influenced by him to such a level that that's the way it came out. So
And
there's
that's it.
definitely that
Let
going
me
on.
ask something. At some point, that was it. Your contact with your handler ended, and that was that.
Yeah. Yeah, in the courtroom. And yeah, when he turned his back on me, he actually asked me to testify in front of a magistrate. He set me up in the courtroom and then he lied under oath. And then I talked to my
Ooh.
lawyer about it and I said, he goes, well, that's what they do. They lie. So, I mean, honestly, if people knew the
Wow.
real story behind this, and I get it. Okay, he has a clearance, this, that, and the other, and he can't tell the truth, but he literally just did not tell the truth, period. He lied under oath. And it put me in that predicament where I was so vulnerable and so interconnected. I think that was awful that they did that. But like I said, I put it in my book. I have a documentary out. And then I
Okay.
moved on from that, and I had my
Okay.
NSA lawyer, which I think was a strong arm. Like I said, I think he was the one shadowing and making sure that they backed off and that stop
Okay.
persecuting her, stop putting her through the courts, stop setting her up and calling her a kook, and stop this BS right now. I think that was part of it, because they had all kinds of propaganda going against me on the internet. It was disgusting. You know how trolls can
Okay.
be. So I had that going on too.
Right. And see, and I hate to say it, but that's one of the things, the internet is great, but
Hmm.
at the same time, it's got a very dark side or a downside for people because they can put stuff out there about people and You know, depending on how good they are, they can make it sound like, hey, absolute, this is
Hmm.
absolute truth.
Right. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot that even back in 2004, there wasn't, well, the internet wasn't like it was now. So it's way
No, but
different, but
still.
still, but yeah, no, they come out of the woodwork. And of course, if you're high profile, they'll have all their little teams. There's their teams there that'll go after you and start the peanut gallery stuff and, spinning
Sure.
off something else. And yeah, it gets pretty crazy.
Absolutely. Solaris, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
For the podcast listeners, because I'll have a link in the credits of the show to where they can find you. But for the podcast listeners, how can they find you? What's the best way?
Be Night Shadow Anomaly Detectives.net or .com. And thank you so
Okay.
much. This has been wonderful, Marlene. I
No,
appreciate
on the
you.
contrary, it's been my pleasure because, like I said, I really think that there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that have gone through similar stuff and either, like you said, they ended up being misdiagnosed as mental illness or even, doing, doing something to themselves because that's got to be a bad thing when nobody believes you.
Hmm. Right. Yep, it is not a good thing. Well, they don't understand it. I think that's the majority part is that they just don't understand what they're dealing
Right.
with tech-wise. But once you explain the technology to them and you get someone who's actually one of the developers or something, then they start to get it. They don't want to believe
Right.
it though, but they do get it.
Well, it's kind of scary if you want to think about it as far as
Hmm.
that being out there, that technology being available
Oh yeah, and
and
that's
that
nothing, I'm sure.
intrusive. A
Right?
lot of
Yeah.
people, it's a hard thing to wrap your head around.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Solaris, thank you so much. Take care.
You
And let
too.
me ask you, are you working on any new books, any new projects or anything coming
I
up?
am. I'm working on a star map, so I'll stay tuned for that, and I'm going to try and get that
Oh,
wrapped up in the next few months. So yeah, I'm working on that, and some other books I'm kind of looking at behind the scenes. So we'll see what happens with that next few months.
okay. Again, good luck to you in all your projects.
Thank you, Marlene. Thanks for having
Take
me.
care. On
You
the
too.
contrary, my pleasure. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
Wow. Let me tell you something. When you hear that, again, most people run to the idea like this is sci-fi. This doesn't really exist. Like I said, excuse me, I gotta drink something. Everybody thinks um like Minority Report, how they were harnessing these three individuals because of their psychic abilities. And of course the girl and the two men, but the main one was her, you know, but putting them together to deliver the Minority Report, as in this could possibly happen. But of course, they were acting on it as in an absolute thing. They never gave people the the choice. How's that? Free will. But anyway, but when you see those stories, of course, it's a great movie. Tom Cruise, great science sci-fi movie. But if we ever go beyond that and we start thinking this is a reality, or that whether it's the government or a private corporation has developed this technology, it kind of like it wigs one. I don't know about you, but it wigs me out to think about that. It's like, yeah, I guess I'd just rather be really ordinary and uninteresting. And I have heard, and I'm sure everybody now, once upon a time, targeted individuals, and of course, that Havana syndrome, which people I believe that were at the embassy, Americans that were at the embassy, um, were experiencing all these symptoms, and they couldn't figure out what it was. From what I understand, they were looked at like physical examinations, and they couldn't figure out why they were. I think it was really bad headaches, and they had a bunch of stuff going. And if I remember correctly, I think that some of them had even suffered some type of brain damage because of it. But the original belief was that they were trying to look at poison, something you ate, something organic. All right. As a matter of fact, this right now, this is kind of a definition of what they consider targeted individuals, or TIs. They claim to be experiencing various forms of surveillance harassment, including chronic highly organized stalking, sudden and inexplicable fracturing of personal and work relationships, and sabotage of businesses, making them impossible to sustain. They believe they are being targeted by malicious actors, often government agents or international organizations, who use electronic harassment, electromagnetic torture, or psychotronic torture to affect their bodies, minds, and daily lives. I believe the Havana syndrome was something psychotronic. All right. And it took a while before they kind of like figured out what was going with those people that developed, like I said, that they were at the embassy, that they realized this was something that they were being targeted, which was not how's this? That wasn't something that they were injected with, or something they were fed, or a gas, or something like that. And to look at, I'm looking at it because I haven't looked. That they also, the Havana syndrome thing, they also call it anomalous health incidents. All right. And again, it was reported primarily by U.S. diplomatic intelligence and military officials stationed in overseas locations. Most of the affected individuals reported an acute onset of symptoms associated with a perceived localized loud sound, followed by chronic symptoms that lasted for months, such as balance and cognitive problems. Wow. Insomnia and headaches. And I remember that thing about the headaches. All right. And again, the first cases were reported by U.S. and Canadian embassy staff in Havana, Cuba. All right, though earlier incidents may have occurred in Frankfurt, Germany, starting in 2016. God, I'm surprised at this. Several hundred U.S. intelligence and military officials and their families reported having symptoms in overseas locations, including China, India, Europe, Hanoi, as well as Washington, D.C. Now, I don't know about you, but we're not talking there sci-fi. We're talking here, military or diplomatic families or diplomats. Let's face it, when you start experiencing this type of symptoms, most people don't go to the, hey, there's something electronic or this targeted weapon. You're thinking regular stuff. They're putting something in through the air. Now, but again, I don't know about you, but to me, it's how's this? If you would say, well, whoever's deploying this or using this type of technology is, how's this? Is using it with, and I'm not talking about the Havana syndrome or the targeting. I'm talking about what Solaris was talking about, that she got basically pulled into this thing. If you're saying, okay, the people that are in it are volunteers, they willingly went into it. Okay. And you're thinking, okay, the people that control this technology or the experiments or whatever it is that they're doing, they're, what's the word I'm looking for? They're good people, or they're not psychopaths, or they're not so. It's like, okay, but that's why I asked her that. In my experience, psychopaths and sociopaths, especially psychopaths, what makes them happy, they don't feel love, compassion, remorse, none of those other things. What makes them happy, if you want to call it that, is control. The more they control, the happier they are. Control makes the world go round. So I'm thinking to myself, when you're talking here about the ultimate control device, there's only one personality that comes to mind that'd be like, oh yeah, we're gonna what? Control these people? Yay! Even if they don't want to do that, yeah. And that's the scary part, as far as I'm concerned. Who are the people that manipulate and are doing and going, well, let's see how far we can go with this. That right there is where you're thinking, okay. And what I wanted to, how's this? Is what they're doing, is this strictly an organic manipulation, whether it's your mind or your brain waves or whatever, or is there a spiritual component to it? Which is why I asked her, is there anything that you could do to say, hey, I might not be technologically advanced with whatever gizmos you got, going on that can control me, but I can't protect myself on a spiritual level because there's a spiritual component to your whatever it is. But based on what she's saying, no, this is strictly um non-organic, but at the same time there is no spiritual workings in there. In other words, you could be at somebody's mercy. Like when she was saying, I had never heard of that thing about Madonna and the neighbor. You know, uh, you know, um, I guess I don't know what she did. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna look this up real quick because okay, the pictures due to the face trial after Karen filed the bizarre music, stomping and shaking walls. No, no, they. You know what? I'm later on. I'm gonna have to find out about this. And you know what? For all I know, this might not have even. How's this? I would have to dig for it because even if I can find something about Madonna and a neighbor, it'll be like a regular neighbor dispute. But there won't be anything about that. That there was a suspicion that Madonna did some type of directed energy. Like, I'm gonna fix your wagon now. Instead of like, how people go to the extreme of taking each other to court or stuff like that. I gotta look that up. But see, that's my point. All right, that because you're so and so, and you could pick up a phone and say, "Hey, guess what? I've got this as my neighbor, and I want you to do this, this, and that." By the way, now remember, without really knowing, this is, first of all, just the fact that somebody could do that, that's a problem. And what if, let's say in this hypothetical, what if Madonna was in the wrong? Maybe this neighbor had every right to be upset at her. But since she's Madonna, she can pick up a phone and go, "Hey, that neighbor right next to me on the other side of the whatever, do this and this." That anybody could say, "Hey, I know somebody that knows somebody," and before you know it, you're having weird experiences. You think you might be going crazy or you're getting sick. That's a scary thing. It is. That anybody should have that power or that ability. Well, in this case, what happened to Solaris, that she was based on what she's describing, she's living life, like a normie. How's this? You're married, you're running a business with your husband. Everything is like she said, I was happy. And then like it's a very it's very disquieting that anybody would be able to have that ability to do that. How's that? And that you can't say no. I don't want to, like that I said, like I'm listening to her and it's like, I can't, it sounds like they didn't take no for an answer. They disrupted your life. And guess what? It didn't matter. Like, in other words, your happiness or whatever your desires were for your life, that doesn't make a difference because, let's say in her case, we think we want to use you for X, Y, and Z. Your personal happiness has nothing whatsoever to do with this. Or your personal desires or whatever you have planned for your life or whatever. Nah, forget that. Forget that. So basically, you're like a tool. We're going to use you for whatever it is that we think that we need you for. I don't know. All right, let me tell you, so you always hear these people saying, "Oh, we live in a matrix." Every once in a while, you hear these stories like with Solaris, and it makes you think like, do we live in a matrix? And I'm not one of these people that usually believes that. All right, but God, when you hear stuff like that, you're like, how much of what a reality is reality versus what is something that we're shown or we're led or convinced or however to think of as reality, and it's not, or it's a facade because, hey, will keep the normies all happy. But again, very stuff, gives you food for thought about what goes on behind the scenes. And by the way, I'm a big believer in, like, I'd rather know the truth versus, and I'm not the kind of person that thinks, oh, stick your head in the sand and just pretend if I don't look at that, or if I don't talk about it, that doesn't exist. No, I don't think that. But at the same time, I want to say that most human beings believe ultimately that, hey, I run my life. Whether you want to, how's this? And there's some people that are more followers and leaders, but always in the back, I think of our DNA, of our makeup, emotional, mental, is this thought that we can make choices for what we want. Sometimes they're stupid choices, but that we always have ultimately what they call free will. All right. And we just described as like, that's an illusion. And I'm hoping that's not the truth, because that's an awful truth. All right. Where your free will is only as good as nobody wants to impinge on it. Wow, what a downer. But no, it's something to think about. It's something to think about. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff going on out there. But you know what? At the same time, one time I did an article on this. And this happened, I want to say, was it like the 16th century? I think this was in Venice, right? And in Venice, what they had was, they had these walls, all right? And on these walls, they had carved a face, all right? And the face, they would have like a slit for the mouth, where you could fit like a letter, like if you wrote something and you fold it over, and you could fit it in through the mouth. And basically what that allowed you to do was, you could tell on people, on your neighbors, on, let's say, your ex whatever boyfriend, your whatever, your mother-in-law, or just, and basically you could feed and accuse them of things, all right, in Venice. And I believe it was either the government, I can't remember if it was like because back then, remember, the government and the religion, they were very, very intermixed. It wasn't separate. But basically, you could accuse anybody of anything, and people would get hauled in and questioned about the accusations. In other words, there was no, you didn't have to prove anything. You could just write this letter, come up to the wall, slip it in the mouth, and they would look at it and read it. Next thing you know, somebody would come knocking on your door and say, hey, the courts or whatever, want to see you. And when you got there, they would basically spring it on you. My point being that, even though we talk about, like what we were talking about with Solaris as part of, as far as the modern technology, there's always been apparatus behind the scenes to, what's the word I'm looking for? Screw with people? Something like that. There always been something there that just for the sociopaths and psychopaths among us. How's that? It's basically, and also, again, how much of this, is there an ET component in the background or not? Or is this just all us? Just all of us back engineered it, but it's all us. But then is a hybridization. It's like, man, what a rabbit hole that is. Well, anyway, guys, I hope you liked this interview with Solaris. I think it was fascinating. Man, talk about something to think about. But again, please sign up for my newsletter on Substack. Go to mppellicer.com. Go miamighostchronicles.com. You've got links there to everything. And not only stories of the supernatural, but also Nightshade Diary, Supernatural Storytime, Eerie.news. I've got links on my website to everything, whether it's the podcast, the MP3 files, or links to the video version of whatever it is. And I'm everywhere, not only YouTube, on CloutHub, I'm on BitChute, I'm on Steemit, I'm in Rumble. etc., etc., etc. And same thing with the podcast versions. You know, wherever there's I'm on most major platforms, and even the ones that are not that major, you're going to be able to find me. So again, guys, thank you so much for being part of my audience. I think you're all wonderful. And again, that's it. She was my last interview for season 16. Season 17 is going to be my next interview, even though it's a little bit staggered. But yeah, that's it. I'm going into season 17 of Stories of the Supernatural. And again, I want to thank you for being part of my audience. Till next time, take care.